Okay, so this guy had a different tact, and it was somewhat refreshing to hear actual answers come out. Let's see. Should we start with 32, South 32, where Representative Dan Bishop, he's a Republican in North Carolina, questions this gentleman, the police commissioner, Christopher Paris, on the location of the various officers on scene.
Had ESU maintained position in that window overlooking the roof, isn't it true that they would have had a clean shot at Mr. Crooks as he was ascending the roof to his shooting position?
I'm not prepared to say that because I don't know the exact timeline of events.
But it's your understanding, though, that they were no longer in that room where they had been previously overlooking the building at the time he was ascending the roof. Is that correct?
Could you repeat that question?
The ESU officers were no longer in that room where they could look out the window and oversee the roof as that video shows.
I believe they were actively searching along with additional municipal officers for Mr. Crooks.
Okay, so they're trying to get to why there weren't more eyes on the roof, the area around the roof, and when things hit the fan, where the local cops, the ESU, that stands for Emergency Services Unit, local, where they were, what they were doing. I don't know that we've solved that, Mike, but what we've gotten to now is a pretty clear picture that the Secret Service had pretty much nothing to do with that building. They completely delegated it to the locals. This guy testified that there were 32 members of local law enforcement there to support Secret Service, and that secret state police, and that Secret Service basically washed their hands of this building and these guys. Once the delegation took place, there were no comms between them. They weren't on the same comms line. That was another thing we learned. So like when the locals, presumably heard word, we're going to get to all that, from the rally goers, there's a guy on the roof, guy on the roof. It wasn't as easy as pressing down your comms button on your walkie-talkie and saying, hey, Secret Service, take out this guy. You're communicating only to other locals. And then on top of all that, Mike, we began the show with Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri saying he's had whistleblowers come forward to him to say that there was a guy who was dedicated to the roof. He got down from the roof because it was too hot. We went back and looked up the high in Butler, Pennsylvania that day, 76 degrees, all of which leaves us where?
Yeah, first of all, full marks to Kimberly Cheadle for being the first person to ever get Democrat Jamie Raskin and James Comer on the Republican side to agree on anything. And they both agreed after that disastrous hearing, 5 hours worth of nonsense, that she had to go. And she did resign, but obviously about 9 days later than she should have. Look, this was a series of critical mistakes from start to finish, from the very outset. And there's a methodology here. Let me start from there. There's a methodology to the security planning for an event, whether it's a rally or a sporting event or whatever it may be. And there's a difference between a national security event, which is something like the RNC or the DNC or the Super Bowl, where you have a year at least out to plan, right? And to dedicate resources. And obviously you're going to massive resources. And then there's the events like took place in Pennsylvania, campaign rallies, for instance. You have less notice, but you still have notice, right? You still have time to plan, and you still have resources. So from the very beginning, the planning of this by the Secret Service, which has primacy, right? They can task and they can request and allocate resources from local and state police, but they're still in charge. They're still the ones who have to make that final call and say, yes, this plan looks good. So you go out and you do your advance. You put together the site survey, which includes everything: deployment of resources, responsibilities, communications plan, timeline, all the information that really anybody who has common sense would think, yeah, you ought to put that into the plan. And then you go from there. This breakdown was a series of failures, which is typical for a security process. It's usually not just one thing. So if we break it down and we say, look, what was the planning like? Well, now we know that Butler County, Washington County, and Beaver County, they all allocated some of their local resources to this event. Butler County was essentially command and control for the local resources, the emergency service unit that was discussed just during that SOT. But they had a meeting the morning of the rally, the 13th of July, in the morning, about 9 a.m. or so. They had a meeting of local officials, the sniper teams, the SWAT teams, patrol, all those local elements gathered together to discuss what was going to happen later that day. And guess who didn't attend? The Secret Service. For whatever reason, and that's another thing that we need to figure out. Why didn't you feel it was important to attend this essentially final pre-op briefing, mission briefing, and go through it and say, you know what about this building here? I know that we said it's outside our perimeter, but what are you doing? And then they would have heard theoretically, well, we're going to man it from inside the building. Oh, okay. Well, why are you doing that? Why don't you cover down the rooftops? Why don't you take what is obviously a problem and resolve it? That didn't happen. Then you have the comms. I'm sorry to bang on about all this, but there's so many areas that we need to discuss.
It's interesting.
Then you have the communications issue. It's not unusual to have multiple frequencies in an operational setting. That's fairly standard, right? But because it's fairly standard, you also have command and control that works around that and allows you to communicate effectively, efficiently, and quickly, right? In real-time situations where things are heading south. They didn't have that. Communications for the SWAT team, I'm talking the local police, the SWAT teams, the sniper teams from the local authorities, patrol from local authorities, those were operating on different frequencies, as were the Secret Service. So if patrol from a local authority saw crooks, which they did, and then they report it eventually, and they get it to the emergency services, the command and control for Butler County, those people hear it and go, oh, okay, got it. Now they got to sit around and think, well, what do we do about that? Well, let's move it forward. Eventually it makes its way to the Secret Service frequency, to the command and control of Secret Service. And that's, again, we don't know what that process was because Kimberly Cheadle decided to show up at this accountability and oversight committee hearing without what should have been archived communications records, right, from the Secret Service. So we know at about 5:10 p.m., Butler County, local authorities.
That's an hour before the shooting.
An hour before the shooting. Shooting took place at 11 minutes after 6 p.m. So about 5:10, they spot crooks, and they're concerned enough to, on their side, on the local authority side, say, oh, it's a suspicious person. How about that? And then a few minutes later, they take a picture of him. Okay, how about you confront him and ask what he's doing? And then roughly about 25 minutes later or so, that suspicious report makes its way, reportedly, we still don't know because we haven't seen those records because Kimberly Cheadle decided it wasn't important, makes its way to Secret Service. Then you've got the overarching massive question. You've got a report of a suspicious person. You're apparently looking for him now, by all accounts from local authorities. Now we're looking for him, including taking the person off the roof to go and assist or take the people out of the AGR building. So
or maybe he just came down because he was hot, but keep going.
At what point did they not realize that let's hold former President Trump in a secure site, keep him there until we resolve this issue? There are so many problems in this that, I mean, we can't cover it during the time that you've got with me, but it is astounding. I've been doing this for 40 some odd years. I hate to say it, in terms of risk and threat assessments, protecting individuals, facilities overseas in some very hostile environments. It's difficult. It's labor intensive. You have to be meticulous in your planning, but you do it over and over again, right? And it's not rocket science.
I got to ask you, I should remind my audience that you're former CIA. You've done security planning for massive events many times, but I kind of understand, I'm not excusing, but I'm starting to understand that the locals screwed up. If they were responsible for that building, then they screwed up. Ultimately, it's the Secret Service's fault. I get that too. They're the ones responsible for protecting the president. But the locals seem to have dropped the ball. They did not have somebody, it's unquestioned, that no one was up there when Crooks got up there. And I don't know whether he left because he was hot. He was never there. It was a sloped roof. We all know that's not true. But for whatever reason, nobody was up there, and that was a failing. So I don't understand, though, Mike, how we got to the point where the director of the Secret Service, I understand nobody wants to blame each other. It's a nice principle, but a man's dead and a former president was almost shot dead. So now we're going to have some hard conversations with real truths. Why wouldn't Kim Cheadle just come out and say, we delegated responsibility for that building to the locals. The locals should have had somebody on the roof. They didn't. That was a failing. It's on them. And yes, ultimately, it is on me. Instead, we got this nonsense. I'll play it here because she went on ABC News. And as the lawmakers pointed out yesterday, she seems to have answered way more questions with ABC than she would in front of our lawmakers, who are us. They're representing us. But this, instead of just saying what I just said, she said this in SOT 27.
The roof have been secure, period.
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. And so, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
Explain that to me.
Yeah, well, I guess from my perspective, 4 decades worth of being engaged in intelligence and security operations around the world. And that is the stupidest statement I've ever heard come from a security expert.
Number one.
And look, she's got almost 30 years in with the Secret Service, so she's not stupid by any means, right? It's a failure of leadership. It's a complete breakdown in crisis communications management and strategy. This is 101 for crisis communications. How they botched this after such an awful result on that rally day in Pennsylvania, I have no idea, because you're exactly right. That's what she should have come out and done, and said, we will, and not only that, but we will get you answers immediately. The nonsense during the accountability hearing when they said, or she said, we're working on that internal review and we're going to get a report in maybe like 60 days.
It's ridiculous.
That's astounding. And so,
Mike, especially because look what period we're in right now in American politics. This will be the 60th busiest days that Donald Trump has had, and now Kamala Harris will have in the course of the last year. This is the lead up to the presidential election. They're going to be everywhere. It's going to be nonstop rallies, outside, inside, big events, conventions. It's not okay to say, in 2 months, we think we'll have it figured out. There's no urgency. And this is the thing that just keeps tripping me up as not a security expert, but just as a lawyer. She lied. The sloped roof thing is a lie. And everybody knows that by now, but I will show you, because Representative Eli Crane, he's a Republican from Arizona, went up to the roof, and this has gone viral online, and he kind of brought us through what the roof looks like, just to put a fine point on it. It's, I think, SOT 30.
It's not that steep at all. Just had a 70-year-old man back here climb up on the roof easily. See that water tower behind me? Had Secret Service or anybody had sniper teams up there, this guy wouldn't have made it 5 feet up this roof. He would have been taken out. Behind me, you see the windows that Secret Service was supposedly in the second floor of this building behind. Makes you wonder why they weren't able to quickly dispatch the individual. And then behind me, back over here where those red roofs are, that's where the stage was set up. That's where the president was giving his speech from. A lot of questions here in Butler.
I mean, it's so flat, you can pour cake batter on it. So that's where I get caught up. Protein bars can be chewy and dense, or so chalky that they crumble apart in your hand. But I want to tell you about the launch of Magic Spoon Treats. You probably know Magic Spoon for their popular high-protein cereal, right? That has more than 75,000 5-star reviews. Well, Magic Spoon has turned their cereal now into high-protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like those classic crunchy cereal bars. Magic Spoon's brand new treats come in 6 deliciously nostalgic flavors, including marshmallow, chocolatey peanut butter, blueberry, birthday cake, yum, and strawberry milkshake. Magic Spoon treats are a tasty time machine back to your childhood. You likely know Magic Spoon cereal, and now we are excited to bring you the news about the launch of their treats. Scoop up these new crispy, crunchy, protein-packed treats right now with 10% off just by going to magicspoon.com/MK or use the promo code MK when you place your order at magicspoon.com. Magic Spoon, hold on to the dream. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.